Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, three things on this show. One is we'll finally talk about Bill Belichick. The people want that, right? Don't they want us chiming in on Bill?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think UNC wants it, but it seems like people are interested in what's happening in Chapel Hill. Yeah.
A little Bill on Bill crime at the end of the show. You might have some thoughts.
Sure.
So we're going to try to learn lessons, though. I did some research on hiring the catch a fallen coach idea that we have discussed previously on this show, but I did some more examples of it. And man, I'm glad North Carolina is not in the North. So we'll touch on that at the end of the show. We'll touch on some comments at our askkotn@gmail.com mailbag. People responding to our perfect quarterback show from last week. People responding to some of our all transfer notions, both in 2024 and 2025 from last week. We'll talk about that. We invite you to share your thoughts, comments, questions, whatever you want to talk about. Ask askkotn@gmail.com. You can send us stuff there. Middle of the show, Penn State versus Notre Dame. This is a new thing we're doing this offseason, Landis. Showdowns. Showdowns, right? We don't just want to talk about teams. We want to talk about teams in context. So we have our 28 Northern teams. We put them in 14 showdowns against what we think are similar programs. We're going to run through both teams and then come to a conclusion. Who would you rather be in 2025? Up first, two teams that we think are looking to make a leap to be a national champion again. Penn State, Notre Dame, both close last year. Neither has been a champ in a while. This is kind of an obvious showdown, is it not?
Yeah, maybe the most obvious we have. Also, maybe the most interesting that we have. Yeah, it'll be fun to dive into. There's a lot with like the intangibles of all of it that I think will be maybe the deciding factor between the two.
So the way we're going to do that is Bill and I are each going to take a side. We kind of act as the attorney for that side. We present the case. We run through 7 different categories, and then we come to a conclusion together of who you would rather be in this little window. So this is a championship discussion for Penn State and Notre Dame, but not all of them will be that. We might have one where we have 2 teams with a coach we think is on the hot seat. Okay, well, who would you rather be? We have 2 teams that we think are trying to prove something. We have 2 teams that we think have young quarterbacks that are trying to make a leap. Who would you rather be? But it's Penn State, Notre Dame to kick us off. But first, we just want to talk a little bit again about this 16-team playoff idea that came out Friday. Ross Jellinger from Yahoo Sports, other people writing about it, that it is supposedly gaining momentum, Bill, that we know already this is going to be the last year of the 12-team playoff. We already sort of have this agreement that they're going to go to 14 at the very least starting in 2026. There had been reports a couple months ago about a 16-team, but it is gaining momentum.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to talk it out a little bit with our folks because we care about how it affects fans. And are we killing our sport, or are we providing more opportunity and more great games for our sport? And sometimes, Landis, this is where I don't know if it's a failing. We kind of knew we were going to do this. I've been thinking about it. I don't know which one it is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to pound the table here. We have some research. I appreciate progress in our sport, but it also makes me a little nervous. This is the entire thing with our sport. You don't trust the people in charge, and that makes everything a little nerve-wracking. Whether it's a discussion about penalizing teams who broke the rules, whether it's a discussion about expanding the sport to potentially provide more opportunities for other teams. There are ulterior motives all over the place, and there always have been. The thing that I like about our sport right now is that the ulterior motives are out in the open. So we know what's up. Nobody anymore is whispering about whether the Big Ten and the SEC are running the sport. They know the Big Ten and the SEC are running the sport. But does that mean they want to kick everybody in the ACC and the Big 12 to the curb and detach from them and ignore them and not care about them at all? Or is there enough of an understanding that, hey, guess what? Good Big 12 ball, good ACC ball, opportunities for those teams to make money and compete and be good. That makes the whole sport stronger. that we don't have to narrow this. We can expand it and make everybody better and make more fans happy and get greater TV ratings. I love what this sport can be. I think for a lot of us, we're often nervous right now about where this sport is going.
Mm-hmm.
Wish we were going to come on here. Maybe you have answers. I don't know. Do people want fist pounding answers college football right now, or is discussing it and having angst together enough?
I don't know what people want. I don't. The thing about like pounding your fist on the table about this is like for what? Like we've already expanded the playoff, right?
Yes.
It was 12. In my opinion, it didn't ruin college football. So like once we got past that, like I don't like 16 kind of makes more sense. Like I don't like 12 is a weird number, right? So like once we got past the fact that expanding the playoff like didn't fundamentally change college football for the negative, then I think you actually need to take a hard look at 12 and figure out if that actually makes the most sense. And I don't know that it does. 16 probably does, but then like how you get to the 16 obviously is the greater conversation, which I think there are a lot of different ways you can go there. So I don't know. Yeah. Like I'm not so much angsty about this. Like I was probably a little more angsty about the initial expansion and what that might mean, for the regular season, and whether or not the idea of being more inclusive was like actually something worthwhile. And it's 1 year of data, I suppose, and maybe you can make too much of it, but I don't know that it did anything to make the regular season worse. It was nice that more teams were involved in that conversation, in my opinion. And I think this expansion would invite even more of that. Like you do get a little worried about like the SEC and the Big Ten just like owning everything, right? And I don't know. They're certainly comfortable threatening to leave and break away. I don't know that they are all the way comfortable in actually doing it if someone were to call their bluff. Nor do I think actually anyone will call their bluff, but I think there's a lot of posturing here, where everyone will realize in the end that maybe that this result of the AQs for the Big Ten and the SEC is probably what's good for everybody. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not in a fist pounding mood about this necessarily. I'm actually more excited about it, I think, than I am than anything else, because the thing I like most about college football, and I'm not saying everyone has to enjoy it the same way that I do, I just like watching good teams play each other, and I feel like this is going to create more opportunities to do that both in the regular season and the postseason.
I think about this a lot. I think this happens in a lot of communities in America. And I live in a house in a suburb that I don't know exactly whether it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago or 50 years ago or 60 years ago, but at one point was a farmer's field. And now it is a subdivision. And I live not in the middle part of a town, but I live at the edge of that town. And I love going into the middle of the town, but I could walk, I could ride my bike. I'm probably going to drive in there. I think this is a lot of places, right? You used to be this big, and now you're this big. And the thing that I think that can be it's very frustrating to me as communities discuss this, and there are proposals for more growth and people fighting against it. And often you rally people. Sometimes I feel like people want the exact amount of progress that got them to where they are, and they don't want one step more. So I live in a house that used to be a field. And once upon a time, I'm sure there were people in this town who didn't want my house to be built. But now that I'm in my house and I like my house, and there's a playground down the street, there's schools nearby, this progress, this expansion was lovely. But that's it. We can't go one step more. Now you want to build another subdivision where 20 years from now, somebody can say, I live in a house that used to be in a field. That I'm against. Mine, I'm for. And I feel like that happens in this sport sometimes, that you have to look out for yourself, but it is very difficult when you want the thing to happen in college football just enough to be perfect for your team. But if it's a half step more to help anybody else, you're out. Maybe it's just life.
Maybe. I don't know. I've always lived in a city that's existed for a long time, so I can't relate.
You're like, if the street that I'm walking down wasn't built for a horse and carriage, I don't want to walk on it. If the street that I'm walking down doesn't zigzag 14 different ways and come to a 9-way intersection, because once upon a time you used to have to clean up your horse poop at this intersection, I don't want to live there. 4-way stops, get out. That's the right. Bill Landis.
No traffic circles for me, thanks.
If your grid of your street, of your town, is in straight lines, Bill Landis wants nothing to do with it. So this 16-team proposal that has been reported on, and again, it's not out of nowhere. It's not out of nowhere. 16 teams, 4 guaranteed spots for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, and then 1 group of 5 spot and 3 at large. And the Notre Dame method of qualifying would come from the at-large pool. And then part of this, and what we want to break this down in categories about how it would affect this group and this group and this group, and your team is in here somewhere. Let's look at what this would have been last year. And the part of this that is the side discussion that actually is a primary part of the discussion is that it seems like the SEC and the Big Ten are potentially very interested in having play-in games for the playoff, where if you have 4 guaranteed spots in the Big Ten, let's say, the top 2 teams, the top 2 finishers who would play in a conference championship game, they're both in. But then you're going to play a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5 to play in for those other guaranteed playoff spots. And then I guess the losers of those games would still be in the mix for the at-large consideration. This is like the NBA with the play-in games. You used to have the playoff. Now you have the play-in to get into the playoff. This would be the play-in games. Last year in the Big Ten, the play-in games would have been number 3, Indiana versus number 6, Iowa, and number 4, Ohio State versus number 5, Illinois. Do you like those? Would you have wanted to see those games a year ago?
The Iowa one's tricky for me. That's the hang up there. I think Ohio State, Illinois could have been interesting. And Illinois had the season that I wouldn't necessarily balk at the idea of them having a potential pathway to play for a postseason spot. Like Iowa at 6-3, nobody watched Iowa last year and thought like, you know what, that's a good football team. That's where some of the issues come in. Now, I guess, would you say that like the Big Ten more often than not might have 6 teams of quality that you would feel okay with being in a position like this? I maybe, but I don't. Six seems like a lot. I would say the same thing of the SEC too. It's the one thing for me, like when you look at the structure, it's like you're opening the door for a potentially average team to have the same opportunity of getting into the playoff as an Indiana team that lost 1 game last year. Like that I can't quite square that.
SEC would have been something like 3 Tennessee versus 6 South Carolina, 4 Ole Miss versus 5 Alabama. South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Alabama were that group of 3 that they thought they deserved to be. They deserved to be in the playoff discussion. They thought they deserved to be in the playoff. In the SEC, you would have answered a lot of questions last year. You would have sort of ended debate. You would have earned it on the field. You look at this situation with the Big Ten. If you believe, so Michigan had a step back year last year. They're the defending national champs. They get in a very specific spot that leads to a weird year. I think more often than not, if you have a situation in the Big Ten where 6 teams can be in the mix, Michigan's probably in there a lot.
Yeah.
And then if you had Wisconsin's in a step back mode, when Wisconsin in the previous decade would have been in that group of 6 a lot. Can Nebraska rise to this? Maybe. Can Washington rise to this? Maybe. Michigan State in the past 15 years would have been right in the thick of it. I almost think Indiana was a great story last year. Ohio State won the national championship. Penn State had a great year. Oregon was number 1 and the only undefeated team. The middle of the Big Ten, or almost like the bottom of the top tier, just those teams I named, what Michigan has been, what Nebraska could be, what Michigan and Wisconsin have been at times. Washington was in the national championship game the year before. There were a lot of teams there that normally I think would make a 3-6 and 4-5 game more compelling and would be, quote, more deserving, that wouldn't have been so last year. I almost think last year in the Big Ten was almost a worst case scenario of what your 6th best team would be. I think more often than not, this would be much more palatable and potentially very interesting, where in the SEC last year, you're trying to discern between a bunch of teams who are sort of equally worthy, which is probably not quite worthy. but almost. So you have a bunch of equally almost teams. I think the Big Ten more often than not will be there. And then if that's the case, do you want to see a bunch of equally almost teams playing each other to get off the almost pile into the in pile? Or is that, would you say I want nothing to do with almost games? What have you done to our sport that we're now an almost sport?
I don't mind the almost games. I would just say like specific to last year's situation, like Iowa was not that, right? It just turned out the Big Ten had 5 instead of 6. But I think you're right. I think more often than not, the Big Ten probably will have 6, if not more than that. So I'm not. I guess I wouldn't be worried of like year after year sitting there going like, boy, this 6 team is not it. They shouldn't be here for either of these leagues. And also like I like that if we're now in this world where we have unbalanced conference schedules and like it's not as much of a straight line to figure out like who's going to play for conference championships and stuff, and then you start inviting like weird tiebreaker formulas. Like this is eliminate it entirely. Like I understand you could have the same conversation for like who's 6th and who's 7th, but this feels a little cleaner and discerning some of that if you're going to actually give teams an opportunity to do it on the field.
In a Big Ten specific conversation, this feels a little bit like reviving the Big Ten West, because if you have 4 automatic spots and you don't do a thing like this, how often it wouldn't be these 4 every year for sure. But with what you have added with Oregon, with what they've been and what they should be, and then the history and the resources of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, the 3 monsters of the old Big Ten East, that's a pretty good top 4. And then if you are Washington or Nebraska or Wisconsin or Michigan State or Minnesota or a team like that, try Iowa, try Illinois, trying to break through, I think you could maybe feel boxed out a lot. Where now, if you think to yourself, man, if we can be 6, we'll get a playing game and we'll take our shot. I think that's encouraging. I think it maybe changes the view on a season for fan bases like that. It's a little bit more of a specific goal than hoping if you just sort of have these at-large things and then you're just fighting. Did we think the Indiana, are they getting enough respect conversation last year was interesting? Was it good for college football? Or if we had this situation where you knew Indiana was going to get into a play-in game, and then it's like, okay, there's automatic spots, they're going to earn it or not. Like, do we want to be talking all year about whether teams are going to be respected enough by the committee, or do we want to get to as many teams earning it on the field as possible?
I would love to eliminate entirely any conversations about the
good.
committee's like subjective view of the sport. So if this gets us closer to that, then great. Yeah. Because I don't think you lose. You wouldn't lose. I use it in Indiana as an example. Like if Indiana was in this world last year on a course to like clearly get itself into a playing game, potentially get into the playoff, people would still be having conversations about like, well, I don't know if this team's very good. Like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here. Like the fun, like sports conversations that people like to have that I certainly think have a place in whichever sport you care to enjoy, without it delving into like, I don't know, like resume talk and what the committee may or may not like. That to me is like the most like uninteresting conversation you can have about college football. I don't really care what the opinions of 13 people that whose names you don't know care about the sport. So if we can just get rid of that entirely, or if their only real influence on any of this is like once we give them the 16 teams, they figure out where to be bracketed, like that's fine. But if we can get to a place where they're not actually choosing the 16 teams that are in the field, I am very much in favor of that.
That committee exists only because we have a large group of teams and a small schedule, and we can't play everybody off against each other to decide it on the field. So we have to turn college football at the end of the year into gymnastics or figure skating just for a little bit, or the NBA dunk contest where you're trying to get someone to hold up their rating for you because you can't play 50 games. This answers this a little bit. So how often do you hear people in the sport say decided on the field? I think you could at first blush be like, are you serious? We're seriously going to have a 3-6 game to get the 6th best team in the Big Ten to have a chance in unbalanced schedules, especially. There are still going to be, I think, and the SEC is the example last year. There's going to be often times where the difference between your third team and your seventh team is hard to discern. So to create another earn it on the field opportunity feels more like a good thing than a bad thing. So I think we're okay with this. These play-in games for guaranteed spots. Okay. Let's talk about this specifically a little bit for all the conferences then. We're just trying to break this down in bite-sized pieces. What this would mean for the Big Ten. We're talking about a 16-team playoff. I looked at the 11 years of college football playoff rankings since we started doing this. How many Big Ten teams were in the top 16 of the final rankings? So we're still talking about a group of 5 team that has to get in. There's some other things, but this is at least a framework, right? Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
The top 16 in the final rankings. The average number of Big Ten teams, because what we're trying to discern here again is, okay, if the Big Ten automatically gets 4, what does that mean? Is that right? Is that wrong? Is that fair? Is that unfair? Is it the right number? 5.1 is the average number of teams that are currently in the Big Ten. So I'm including USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington in this number because that's what matters, right? Is that okay that it's not how many Big Ten teams were in it in 2015 of what the Big Ten was then? 5.1 is the average. And do you know how many years of the 11 there weren't at least 4 Big Ten teams in the final 16? So we have the average, but how many times did they not hit the threshold? Do you want to guess at the 11? None.
1 or 2? Yeah, none. Yeah, okay.
None. So they had between 4 and 6 every single year. 4, 6, 6, 6, 4, 6, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4. So Tony Petitti should ask for 5. That's my conclusion on this. The Big Ten deserves 5 automatic bids. But I think, again, there are some people who are on principle fighting against automatic bids for any conference. And I think this is not a time to have principles in college football. I think this tells me the Big Ten they deserve to have 4. So let's not fight too much about this. What do you think of this idea if we got to a 16-team playoff where the Big Ten had 4 guaranteed and then there were still 3 at large that the 5th best or 6th best Big Ten team would be in competition for? What do you think?
I like it. I think 4 feels right. For the conference, for the Big Ten and the SEC. And in those years where that number was higher, whatever, 5 or 6, you still have the opening there to get those teams in. And you don't, I would actually not love like anything more than that, because then you're like, you could be shoehorning in like a bad team. Like if it's a down year for the league, I wouldn't want that. Like, I think there are ways, I think people look at a 16-team thing and say, like, you might water down the national championship, you water down the regular season, whatever. I think you would give yourself a much greater chance of doing that if you increase the number of automatic qualifiers past 4, because then you're going to put a middling Big Ten team in there some years or middling SEC team in there some years, depending on what the league's doing that particular year. So I think historically, if you look at the math, which you did, 4 makes sense. I would imagine that maybe, even though like they haven't said it, like Tony Petitti might be holding the number 5 over people. It's like a way to like, listen, we're only asking for 4. We could ask for 5 as a way to get people like more on board with this thing. So if this is the route that we're going to go with the playoff, I think 4 makes sense for the Big Ten. Yeah.
I think it makes sense on both sides. I don't think I was joking. 5 is too, you're right. 5 is too many. So I think this is fair to the Big Ten. And also if you're fighting against it, I just think save your energy to fight against something else. Okay. Effect on the SEC. Average number, this is putting Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC. Average number of teams in the top 16 over the last 11 years for the SEC, 4.8. Now the Big Ten has 2 more teams, right? So we get that. But also the other thing that's part of the USC stinks like hot garbage. No offense to USC, who is not part of the North and occasionally must creep into this discussion as a Big Ten team. Imagine if USC didn't stink like hot garbage right now. And just to, again, imagine like the world where Michigan State and Wisconsin, some of these like really good programs kind of come back towards their peak. 4.8 for the SEC. Do you want to know how many times out of 11 years they did not hit the threshold of at least 4 teams in the top 16? Again, this is counting Texas and Oklahoma as part of the SEC the whole time.
0.
3. Suck
what?
It. Cram that. How's your cram hole? Oh, that cram was so good. Sword time. Get this out 3 times. What do we think this sport is? We think this is dominated by the SEC. The current Big Ten is constituted, has earned this right every single year. 3 out of 11. The SEC was short. It's so top heavy. This is so good for everybody. The Big Ten really, like, we underestimate, I think, especially when you add Washington and Oregon. Mm-hmm. And when we think about what at their best Wisconsin and Michigan State and Iowa and teams like that have been and can be, we underestimate, we don't understand the depth in the top middle of the Big Ten, and we overestimate that in the SEC, a conference that was propped up by the greatest coach of all time and a new burgeoning dynasty at Georgia, and adding Texas, who kind of has stunk for a while, but now is good again. 3 out of 11, they wouldn't have earned it. That's why Sankey's asking. That's why Sankey's asking. You think the SEC is asking from strength. They are asking not from weakness, but just, did you like that number? I could feel it coming out of me. The cram. God, sometimes you don't get enough cramming in the spring. And that felt good.
Yeah, you gotta stretch those muscles every now and then. I'm surprised by that. I enjoy it. It makes me feel good, but I'm surprised that that's the answer, because they're given the boost by Oklahoma making the playoff all the years that it did, and Texas has made it twice, I guess once as a member of the SEC. So now how many SEC teams have made the playoff? Like prior to the addition of Texas and Oklahoma? 3, 4?
Georgia,
Florida. Alabama, LSU, Florida. No, Florida never made the playoff.
Oh yeah, Urban. He was before the playoff.
Georgia, Alabama, LSU,
and everybody else was pre that, right? Yeah. So anyway, the SEC stinks like hot garbage, and just please take this into your meetings. Please take this into your meetings. 4.8 on average. 3 times they missed it. The 3 times they missed it, 15, 16, and 22. To be fair, the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, 7 of the top 16, 6 of the top 16. So this is a little bit, okay, we also understand that, right? There's history, then there's recent history. 4 is, I think, right for the SEC. But the thing I would say is, don't think the SEC deserves the 4 more than the Big Ten. And again, this is what we say on this show a lot. I'm not necessarily saying the Big Ten deserves it more than the SEC, but definitely the SEC does not deserve it more than the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Big 12, take your 2 and run. Yes?
Yeah,
That's
I don't know what
Brett
Yormark's doing. Like, I know he said he was going to come to the meeting with data. It's like, keep your data in your pocket, bro. Take your 2.
Big 12, average of 2.6 teams a year based on who is in the Big 12 now. 2.6. We're talking about 2 automatic bids, but the last 2 years it's been 1 and 1. And those are the 2 years out of the 11 that the Big 12 did not meet the threshold. So don't look a gift horse. I think a part of this, and we can lump in the ACC too. The ACC 2.2 on average as currently constituted. They did not hit that 2 threshold 3 times in the 11 years. So the Big 12's in a little better spot than the ACC, I think. In the first year of the playoff in 2014, the Big 12, as currently constituted, would have had 5 of their current teams in the top 16, which is the same number as the SEC. And they had 5 in 2021. So there are peaks. I do think I get where your mark is coming from, because I do not think we should underestimate what Utah and Arizona State and Arizona and Kansas State and Iowa State and programs like that have been and can be. But also take your 2 and run. Any expanded playoff that guarantees 2 for the Big 12 has to be a rubber stamp yes from that conference.
I agree 100%. Yeah. And slim chances, I guess, that can happen, but there's also the opportunity to get more in there with the at-larges, right?
Yes.
It wouldn't happen regularly, but it could happen. I take it. I don't know. Again, that's when I mentioned the posturing earlier. That's all I think this is. Like, I think Brett Yormark has to say one thing and do another, like to help his conference save face. And so I think they will. Because he can try to call their bluff, I guess, they being the SEC and the Big Ten. Ultimately, I don't think it would get them anywhere. And the risk of doing that, I far outweighs the reward, I think. So I don't know that I would do that if I were him.
BYU wound up 17th in the final rankings last year, so that's why there was only one for the Big 12. But I think you have to understand, you can fight anything that he does that fights for a stronger perception of the Big 12, I think is accurate and worthy and understandable, but you can't go too far. Mm-hmm. So how much I'm here for posturing. Happens a little bit on this show.
Yeah.
I'm here for posturing, but when push comes to shove, take the 2 and go home, because you're still in danger of a 16 because they already don't respect you enough. So fight for that respect, but also understand it's an uphill battle and you're going to have to earn it. And part of the way to earn it is to make sure you're getting 2 in and then have those 2 teams go win some games. Right? Like that would help.
Yeah.
And Arizona State playing right down to the wire with Texas was really good. And I think BYU, if it had gotten in last year, could have played with a lot of those teams. But let's see it. Let's do it, right? Let's earn it. And then you get the 2 in, you fight, you show how good you are, and then you start getting a few more at large. And then when it comes up again 10 years from now, maybe you can fight for more. ACC, I think the ACC might have I don't know where the ACC is, but when you think what Clemson has been, Clemson's a modern day blue blood. And then you think what Miami and Florida State think they should be, but actually aren't.
Yeah.
I think they could talk themselves into more than 2, but then they also understand that they're leaking. And I think they might just take the 2 and be fine.
Yeah. I don't think, they don't have much of a compelling argument beyond Clemson there for me to think that they deserve more than 2, unless if Miami and if Florida State wants to get up off the mat, Miami wants to show me more consistency, I guess. But then it's like you're looking at programs that might spike periodically behind those 3, and I don't think that's. I almost like the Big 12 a little more than I do the ACC.
Okay, the effect on smaller conferences. Part of this is there. I think are some people who still think if you're going to expand to 16, every conference champ should earn an automatic spot. So that means
I used to think that. Yeah.
I could not think it less, because I think the people who like that idea then think, well, we don't really think those conference champs are going to beat the 1 seed and the 2 seed and the 3 seed and the 4 seed. But then the 1 seed and the 2 seed and the 3 seed, they get easy games in the first round. I don't think we can do this. They're still young players, and I know they're being compensated now. I just think creating a playoff where you are acknowledging that the first round is blowouts, where you are going to play games that you play in September as buy games, as money games, like, hey, come to our stadium so we can kick your butt for $2 million. And now that's a playoff game. It's a waste. So 1 for the group of 5 to me is still fine. And then good luck to all those teams. Go undefeated and get one of the at-large spots. I'm great with that. I don't know that this is an overwhelming conversation. I did see it pop up again after this report came out. For some people, for the group of 5 type people, I just think you have to live in the real world. And I think there's no part of this that's realistic.
You would have to tweak the schedule a little bit. Could I sell you on the 4 best G5 champions playing off for their 1 playoff spot?
Oh, you want to do a play-in version of that while the 3-6 games in the SEC and the Big 10 are going on? You want to give me a football festival?
It would be a 2-week deal, though, for them.
You want to give me a football festival? Do you want to give me a football festival where the G5 champs, and I guess, is it the G6 now that the Pac-12, we have to call it? I guess it was the G6. I don't know.
Only 2 teams. And they're going to make a Frankenstein of all that eventually, right? Yeah.
Is that what you want? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do that? I'm in. You're a genius.
Watch.
God, I love you. God, let's go. 1,000% for that. Earn it on the field. We're subtweeting the entire playoff, but we get it.
Boise plays Miami, Ohio, and I don't know. Jacksonville State plays Army.
I mean, I can't get behind that more. Like, that is spectacular to me, because guess what we've already done on this show? Talked about how excited we are for Boise State at South Florida in week 1 on a Thursday night. I just don't want both of them in playing Ohio State and Georgia in the first round and acting like, hey, we have a college football playoff. That's all. Give us your best one. Give us your best one. But don't give me 5 of them. But if you want to have a little mini tournament to determine the one, could not be more here for it.
Yeah, and you make your own TV deal for that little mini tournament, and you disperse it among the G5.5, whatever it is. Yeah.
So good.
You're welcome for the idea, G5.
So good. And then I guess, I mean, you could just do it. So if you have a G5, G6, whatever it is, but you just say, okay, we're going to take the 4 teams that are highest in the playoff rankings or however you want to do it. You create some kind of formula, and those are the 4 that make it. And then, so not everybody gets to play it on the field because, again, you can't extend the play-in tournament for a month, but I really like that idea. Have you heard someone else say that, or did you invent that?
No, I just invented it. Yeah.
Landis Cup? Landis Cup?
The Landis Cup. Yeah.
You'll be there to present?
I will. Absolutely.
So the effect on scheduling, this is, I don't want to get bogged down in this. You're just going to get, are you going to get more good games? The one thing like Ryan Day from Ohio State had talked about, if you give the guaranteed spots to the conferences, it gets everybody to chill out a little bit with their worries about playing too many good non-conference games. Mm-hmm. Because then it's whatever you do in your non-conference, you can still go into your conference schedule and earn a guaranteed spot. And then if you don't get one of the guaranteed spots and now you're in the at-large field, well, a good non-conference win is really going to help you. I still think because the TV networks want it, I think some of the posturing here about like, hey, we're not going to play these cool non-conference games if you don't give us the guaranteed spots is a little bit fake. But if that's what you have to do to make sure they play them, and this also potentially gets the SEC to 9 conference games, this gets us potentially to a Big Ten SEC September scheduling agreement where they go head-to-head. I think if that does happen, the ACC and the Big 12 will very quickly follow suit and do the same thing. I think the guaranteed spots in an expanded playoff might get us significantly more cool regular season games, which is a win for fans.
I think it would. Tony Petitti said something to that effect. I think it was in the Yahoo story that Ross Dellinger wrote, like, you want us to play more of these, like, give us the spots. Ryan Day, as you mentioned, said the same thing. And I do I think I agree with you that I think part of the threat of like those going away if they don't get automatic qualifiers is a little bit of, again, posturing. But if this automatic qualifier situation more like formalizes like a Big Ten SEC thing, or it's like even teams that in the past have not always had the appetite to play those kind of games are almost kind of forced to now, I'd be okay with that too. So I think this gives us more. I don't want to be naive and say, like, of course, like the stakes of the regular season are a little different. I don't know that they're worse, but they're different. But if we can counterbalance that with like better helmet games and more good teams playing each other, I think that's a good trade-off.
I think what the traditionalists, and I'm not poo-pooing this, the people who didn't want any expansion, who wanted 4-team playoff, who would have been happy to go back to a 2-team playoff, they want the do or die nature of the regular season. I think they overestimate the do or die nature of the regular season, because I even think in that era, what it could encourage sometimes is, well, we have to go undefeated to make the national championship game. So we're not going to play that many good games because we don't want to risk a loss. And then they celebrate that one loss that kills you. But what I think you potentially are doing is I think undoubtedly you're creating the opportunity for more good games. And then at the end of the year, we are creating so many do or die games that I think it makes up for fewer do or die games during the regular season. And the regular season becomes a little more, let's play awesome games. Let's play cool opponents. Let's play good competition. Let's have a great Saturday. If it loses, it doesn't kill you. But then we're expanding at the end of the year. How many do or die games did you really have in the BCS era? I mean, you had some, but did you have more than you would in a 16-team playoff that has 3 levels of play-in games? Where now we're at, well, we just said there's 26 do or die games in the postseason. Did you have 26 regular season do or die games? I think it's just at different parts of the schedule. And then I did this. I'm not going to read it all here, but just going through like the history of some major teams. Ohio State played more high-level, cool, big-time blue blood non-conference games in the postseason last year than sometimes they would in a 3 or 4 year stretch in the aughts, when they were dominating the Big Ten and not really playing anybody. And it was like, well, maybe they played one good non-conference game. Maybe they went to a good bowl at the end and that was it. And now you're giving opportunities for bang, 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 bang in the playoff. I just think I understand if people hear 16 teams, if they hear play-in games and they get worried that we're oversaturating the sport. And there is an oversaturation point. There is a point where there's too many houses. Everything is a development. There's no more farms. There's no more forests. There's no more parks. There is a point. I don't think this is it. The next level might be it. 16-team playoff with some playing games, especially with the Landis Cup. I think we're still good. And I actually think we might be creeping toward a sweet spot that would be potentially, I like the 12-team. But the way this could all work, I think it could be even better than what it is with 12. And I don't think it would be worse.
I don't think it'd be worse. No. And I know like I thought the first weekend of the playoff this year was awesome. I know like it was kind of chalky, but like those environments were great. Like, so we're like inviting the opportunity for more of those. So like, yeah, I don't, like I said at the beginning, like once we open the door to expansion, I don't know how 16 is any worse off than 12. In fact, I think there are a lot of ways in which it's better. So if you go past that, then yes, I'm with you. Like, I don't know that I want to see a 32-team college football playoff or this March Madness style bracket for college football or anything like that. But there was always going to be a bit of like fact finding once we expanded to figure out what exactly the best formula was. And I'm not saying 16 in this particular format is exactly it, but it could be like, and whatever the motivations might be, people actually might stumble onto what is like the ideal playoff situation.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting a little feedback in here. If you guys have thoughts on this, we appreciate everybody who's chiming in. We will take this into consideration as we continue. I mean, and they're going to get to decisions on this eventually. 2025 is going to be the last year we do 12. Starting in 2026, it's either going to be 14, it might be 16, it might have these play-in things, it might not. The SEC might play 9 games. They might have the scheduling agreement in the non-conference season. So a lot is sort of set, but a lot is yet to be determined. Ask KOTN@gmail.com if you want to share your thoughts on that. But for now, we got to get to our showdown. You ready to do this?
Yep.
Who you being? Who you being in the showdown?
I'm Penn State.
Oh, I thought I was Penn State. That'd be bad, wouldn't it?
It would be.
I'm Notre Dame. We'll do that next on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. We appreciate you guys being here, whether you are listening on a podcast, whether you're rewatching back on YouTube, or whether you are live with us here in the YouTube chat right now. We just could not be more grateful for your participation. And it just strikes you sometimes, Landis, that we actually get to do this for a job.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? I mean, like, does it?
Pretty great.
It strikes me at least once a week, and without the people here who are consuming it, it couldn't happen. So we're just incredibly grateful for you. KOTN Showdown. This is the first one. These are two teams, two proud blue bloods who, as of late, have not quite been at the peak that they once held in college football. Last national championship for Notre Dame in '88, right? Last one for Penn State in '86. So very similar here. They played in a semifinal. Last year, Notre Dame won. Notre Dame made the national championship game. But this was kind of an obvious pairing as we're going to get to other pairings where we discuss two teams in concert that are going to have maybe at first blush less to do with each other, although I think we can make the case they actually are pretty similar. Penn State and Notre Dame are kind of two sides of the same coin here, are they not?
Yeah. I think people get it with these two. Why we paired them together, sort of where they're at, what's at stake for them this year.
Okay, so we have 7 categories. We're going to talk about these teams in context with each other in each of the 7 categories. And then we will determine a winner in each category. And then at the end, we'll say, okay, who would you rather be in 2025? It doesn't mean the other team's not good. It doesn't mean the other team can't have a great season. But we think you're kind of the same. who has a little leg up. And this is teams with great histories who are really good, who seem primed to really make a run at winning it all in 2025 when they were pretty darn close last year. The first category is quarterback. Who's Penn State's quarterback?
His name is Drew Aller.
Heard of him.
Perhaps you have heard of him. Would you consider Drew Aller polarizing?
Oh.
Or people on the side of like he's not quite as good as we thought he'd be?
Is he the Joe Flacco of college football? Is Drew Aller elite?
Yeah.
Is Drew Aller elite?
He is Joe Flacco, I think.
He's good. He's good.
He's good, and he was better last year, and like he got better, right?
And he got better. I think, and this is really matters to this discussion. Is it for sure that Drew Aller could be your national championship quarterback if you have a lot of other things going on? Great offensive line, great run game, awesome play call in a tight spot, defense gets a stop, you get a return on special teams. He could be your quarterback. Mm-hmm. Is that a definitive yes?
I think it's a yes. Yeah.
Can Drew Aller lead you to the national championship? That's where we get to the enigma, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Because
does he have to?
He threw a pick. He threw a pick on a do or die play at the end of the game where he admitted I probably shouldn't have gone to that read and made that throw, where there was an opportunity as the quarterback to go win that game against Notre Dame. This is a high bar. This is a high threshold. You have to do a lot of good things to have this be the conversation of can you lead your team to a national championship? But that's the Aller conversation.
Yeah. JC in the chat says he's not polarizing. He's an enigma. Like that's probably right.
Because I think
Lori says he's underwhelming, which I also think is true at times. Yeah.
I don't know that it's like there's this side of Drew Aller and this side of the Drew Aller conversation, and they're fighting with each other. It is a lot of everybody in the middle saying like, I don't know, maybe.
I think he's squarely on one side of that, and people are just like waiting for him to get to the other side, which like he hasn't done yet.
Yes,
and you question whether or not
very good, and he might have been a first-round pick if he had. I feel like J.J. McCarthy was a little bit like this through his entire career, and then in the end, he won a national championship for an undefeated team and went in the top half of the first round of the NFL draft, and people still are maybe saying, is J.J. McCarthy that good? That could be the path that Drew Aller's on.
Could be, yeah. He was so James Franklin was asked about Drew Aller a lot in the spring, and he said Drew Aller needs to take another step this year. But he also said I think he's done that every year that he's been here, which I think is like unequivocally true. Saw gains last year in completion percentage by a decent amount, yards per attempt by almost 2 yards, big time throw rate by about 2%. Improved his average depth of target. Now, with that, he had more turnover worthy plays and more interceptions, but like we wanted that from Drew Aller, right? I think Penn State's offense, while limited in a lot of ways that we'll get into, was better. And part of that, I think, is some of the strides that Drew Aller made. But when the opportunity was there for him to like go win a college football playoff semifinal for Penn State, like he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's why I think like underwhelming is probably maybe the word I would say for him. And it can be taken as like a strong kind of indictment of a guy who was a 5-star prospect and has played very well in long stretches for Penn State. But he came to Penn State with people thinking and hoping and wanting him like to be the guy that elevates the program to the next level. And I don't know that he's quite met those expectations just yet.
CJ Carr at Notre Dame is 2 years away from being Drew Aller.
Yeah.
And this is one of those, it's very similar. Drew Aller's in his 4th year of college. CJ Carr is going to be in his 2nd year of college. Drew Aller's a 2-year starter. CJ Carr is a no-year starter. But I think if we went backwards with Drew Aller for 2 years, I think it would feel very similar to where CJ Carr is right now. And then we as sports fans, as people who talk about this thing, a lot of time we'd rather have the unknown, maybe hasn't done it yet, but might be awesome than the established pretty good. Mm-hmm. So as we try to determine like which quarterback situation you'd rather have, Notre Dame versus Penn State, There is an established pretty good and a completely unknown has not played. Could he be awesome? I don't know how anybody could say that they wouldn't take the Penn State quarterback situation here, but man, CJ Carr might be great this year. He started 10 of 12 in the spring game led 2 scoring drives early, had a pick later in the game that maybe the guy ran his route at the wrong depth. Like, I think they were trying to say maybe it wasn't even his fault. Just made a couple throws that you say, oh man, give me some more of that. And then Kenny Minchie is like an interesting option to have there. And I think both of them, they can get out of trouble. That's going to be a good offensive line at Notre Dame. They can both get out of trouble. That's what Riley Leonard did well last year. And I think Marcus Freeman wants that in his quarterbacks. I think CJ Carr can do it. But I think CJ Carr also probably is going to throw it better, more consistently than Riley Leonard did last year. And Riley Leonard was a baller and did a lot of really good things for Notre Dame, but that wasn't what he did best. And they knew that. So I think it has a chance. I think Notre Dame's quarterback play certainly is less experienced, but actually could be better than it was last year. Do you think that's possible? CJ Carr could be, quote, better than Riley Leonard?
I think he could be better than Riley Leonard and better than Sam Hartman. Yeah.
But will he be better than Drew Aller? So this is, we're very enthused about the upside of CJ Carr. They're going to play 2 tough games early, and then he's going to have a lot of time to work it out. But Aller could Drew Aller, what's the % chance that Drew Aller is the best quarterback in college football? Whatever that means. And I'm not really saying, is he going to win the Heisman? Is he going to be the first quarterback taken in the draft? But is he going to be the guy that, man, I'd take that guy. He's a winner. He's a leader. He makes big plays when you need him. That's the guy.
I don't know. Like the accountability thing is interesting there, because maybe that's the thing that I feel like I've like been wanting to see the most out of Drew Aller that hasn't quite shown up yet. It's just like, we need a play, man. Can you go make it, kind of thing? And maybe he has. So I don't know. I don't think short of like a few examples off the top of my head that I could pull to illustrate that he doesn't have a quality about him. I would say that maybe that's the thing that keeps him from being the best quarterback in college football this year.
Yeah, it's hard because his sophomore year, first year as a starter, Mike Yursich as the OC that year got fired at the end of the year. It felt like they kept him in a phone booth. They kept him in a box. They didn't want to take the wrapping paper off. Don't make mistakes. They didn't throw a pick forever, but they didn't really let him rip moments. I think they, in the end, as we're at the conversation with Drew Aller of can he get over the top, I actually think, I don't want to say they babied him, but I think they almost protected him too much early, that maybe has inhibited or slowed down his progression to the getting over the top A+ kind of quarterback. I think they maybe enhanced his chances of being very good, but now you've got to get there. But also, it's his 3rd year as a starter, but it's only his 2nd year with Andy Kotelnicki. I think the progress he made last year, it's very reasonable that he could make another similar leap in year 2 with that guy calling the plays.
Yeah. I think they successfully navigated like what happened with Christian Hackenberg, where just like they ended up with like a broken quarterback by the end of his freshman year. Yes. But in making sure he didn't become that, they created a quarterback who's like still a little hesitant to let it rip.
Yes. So interesting.
Yeah.
Man, I can't wait to see what happens. I think we have to go Penn State here in the quarterback battle, though, while both being very excited about CJ Carr and get back to us in December.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's mostly an age and experience thing. Skill. What do you think of the Penn State skill? This is running backs, tight ends, receivers. We're going to discuss all these teams, like the guys who are going to have the ball in their hands.
Yeah, I mean, running back is top tier. It's Nick Singleton, it's Katron Allen. I wonder, like, comparing these two teams, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and if you want to add the third guy, was it Quentin Joyner? Is he the freshman? And then compare it to Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas Williams. It just like cancels each other out maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But the running back position is excellent at Penn State. Receivers totally remade via the portal. We talked about them adding Trevor Pena last week. So I think really like solidify it, there's identifiable roles, I think, for all 3 of the big transfer receivers Penn State added. Trevor Pena, Devontae Ross from Troy, Kyron Hudson from USC. You have like the slot guy in Pena, the like explosive sort of yard after the catch guy on the outside, and Ross, and Hudson's Drew Aller was talking about like Kyron Hudson's like a really reliable contested catch guy. So I think those 3 fit together well. You can at least see it. It definitely has a chance of like finally working for Penn State in terms of going after transfer receivers with the way that those three guys seem to fit together. And there's also Tyseer Denmark. I just want to mention him. He's a second-year receiver who did not play much last year, but there were times last year where it felt like maybe he was about to break through. So maybe he can be the fourth receiver in that mix. The tight end lineage of Penn State is incredible. But they have to replace Tyler Warren. So we've mentioned Luke Reynolds. There's actually another guy we've not talked about really at all. Andrew Rapalea, very similar recruiting profile to Luke Reynolds. Played one game last year, got hurt, and missed the entire year. So like I don't want to just assume like it's going to be Luke Reynolds necessarily. I think there maybe are two guys there that can step up. And then Khalil Dinkins is still there. He's in his 5th year. He's he was a backup last year, tight end too. Like good red zone guy. Not a ton of catches, but like a decent amount of touchdowns for how many catches that he does have.
I think a good tight end too. He's like a good tight end
solid,
too for a
solid
team.
tight end too. Yeah, like a solid tight end too. So it's all about what the receivers like can and cannot do for Penn State. Like running backs gonna be very good.
Yeah,
the track record at tight end makes you believe they'll be okay there. It's just a matter of do they have reliable, dangerous people at receiver or not this year.
So I think I would take the Penn State backs. Jeremiah Love is awesome, though. Obviously, 1,000-yard back last year. Jadarian Price, 746 yards as a backup to Love. Mostly was effective when Love was out and dealing with some injury stuff. Price didn't do much in the playoff when Love kind of came back around, and then Aeneas Williams developed as a third down guy. The point is, both these backfields have three guys they rely on. Is Love the best, but then Singleton and Allen are second and third if we were having a draft?
Yes.
Of these guys. So I think you sort of get in a situation there. I think I maybe would lead Penn State on the running backs. Eli Raridan had a good spring. They lost Mitchell Evans at tight end at Notre Dame. Has been kind of a guy that they were waiting to pop a little bit. I think people thought he popped. So that was very, I think, important for Notre Dame because they usually like to have that kind of tight end that they rely on. Had 2 torn ACLs in this pass, so I think is maybe ready to move past that. Some bad injury luck. And then just very similar, well, not similar. Penn State has completely remade its receiver room, and then the guys they had left. Notre Dame, and we talked a lot about this going into that semifinal, questions for both receiver rooms last year. Notre Dame's guys showed up in the playoff at receiver, I think, in a way that the Penn State guys didn't as much. Jordan Faison was really good in the first 2 playoff games. Jaden Greathouse was really good in the second 2 playoff games. They're both back and are going to play a lot, but they added Will Pauling from Wisconsin and Malachi Fields from Virginia, who had 800 receiving yards at Virginia last year. He was not there for the spring, but those are probably their top 4 guys, and that's pretty good. Will Pauling last year at Wisconsin, when it got sideways, 42 catches on 75 targets, but the year before, 73 catches on 109 targets in 2023 at Wisconsin. Fields, Pauling, Greathouse, Faison. Fields is 6'4", 220. Pauling's like a little slot guy, just really good ads. And they added guys last year at receiver that didn't quite pop all the way. Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell. Then it turned out their in-house guys were the guys they relied on. I think these ads are better for Notre Dame. And the in-house guys have now done it in big spots and are more ready, I think, to be even better. I think it's a quite good top 4 at receiver for Notre Dame. Tight end's a little bit of a step back. Jeremiah Love's an All-American candidate. I go Notre Dame the edge here at the skill spots.
I think I can get there. Part of the hang up for me when I look at Penn State's receivers in particular is like Trevor Pena was very good for Syracuse. He was also an incredibly high volume passing offense.
He was,
and he's not going to be in that at Penn State. So like, does that like neuter at all the potential impact we think he might have? Because if you look at him like on like a per catch basis, he doesn't wow you. It's just that he had a ton of opportunities last year. No, I think he can be reliable in a way similar to what Tyler Warren was, which is what you said last week when we talked about him. But I also, there could be some like danger in assuming that too, because it's not like Trevor Pena has been a 3 or 4 year producer. He was just in a offense that threw the ball a ton last year with a good quarterback in Kyle McCord and put up a really nice year. So I think with Pena, there's projection that I think might pull you back a little bit. I think that with Hudson, I like Ross a bit, but he's an up transfer. So, and then the track record with transfer receivers at Penn State just hasn't been good. And I think it's fair to hold that against them. So I would probably lean Notre Dame's skill a little bit too, because I think I like their receivers more. And I like, while Penn State might have two two A-level backs, like Jeremiah Love is still very good for Notre Dame. So
Yeah.
I think I'm comfortable going Notre Dame.
Josh has Devin Ross, the X factor for Penn State this year.
Okay. Like I
No?
don't the Devontae Ross, he means, right? Yeah. Like I don't.
Oh, Devontae Ross. I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like the thing that they both added. They both are returning great backfields. They both are replacing good tight ends. Obviously, Penn State's is a great tight end. They both added receivers in the portal, but Notre Dame also has a couple guys in-house at receiver that they know can do it, that Penn State doesn't have as much. So Penn State's relying on 3 transfer receivers, but if Devontae Ross emerges as that guy, then now their foursome versus Notre Dame's foursome, I can understand that because it's reassuring to me that Faison and Greathouse showed up. Not every snap, but they showed up and made big plays that helped propel Notre Dame to the national championship game, whereas we have not seen that on their teams for the Penn State receivers.
I do think Ross is the guy I believe in the most of the transfers. And I like however it shakes out, Penn State will be markedly better at receiver than it was last year.
Okay.
So like even if all 3 guys don't hit to the max level, Penn State is in far better shape at that position than it was last year.
Offensive line. Are we potentially in a situation where we're talking about the 2 best offensive lines in the country?
I would feel more comfortable saying that about Penn State because Notre Dame is banking on a lot of guys playing who just like were hurt last year and couldn't play a lot. So there's more experience in production with Penn State, and there's still more projection baked into what Notre Dame's hoping to have. But I do think both offensive lines will be very good. Yes.
So why don't you run through the Penn State guys? We don't have to spend a lot of time on this because we've done a lot of offensive line already on this show recently. And the bottom line is they're both going to be really good. And they both were really good last year and absolute driving forces to both these teams making the Final Four.
Yeah. Penn State had 6 guys start last year. 5 of them are back. The only spot that's up for grabs is right guard because Sal Wormley is gone, but they have the next guy there in Cooper Cousins, who was a true freshman last year, who James Franklin said this guy's going to be incredibly hard to keep off the field. He never got like a consistent offensive role, but I think he played in every game. And he'll start, and then like Nick Dawkins is good at center. Vengo Awane is great at the other guard position. Drew Shelton at left tackle, and then either Nolan Rucci or Anthony Donka at right tackle, probably both. Like they have 5 guys with significant starting experience, and then a 6th guy who's like they think is going to be a high draft pick by the time his career is over. So, and they actually added in the transfer portal when they probably didn't have to. So, it would be hard to do this study, I guess. But I like position groups that have done like the biggest turnaround in the last probably 5 years. Penn State's offensive line has to be up there because this was a real
like Allar's first year as a starter. It was part of it was like, well, his offensive line isn't very good. What's the guy supposed to do?
Yeah. And now like I thought they were very good last year, and now basically they have the whole line back. So
yeah,
I think Penn State absolutely has a chance to have the best offensive line in the country.
Okay. Notre Dame, to your point, it's just they lost Rocco Spindler, Sam Pendleton, and Pat Coogan in the transfer portal to big time programs because they're so set, because they have so many other guys. And so it's not like a worry for Notre Dame. But then when you start going through the 5, it's like, well, actually, like those other guys did play a lot. And it's not quite as locked in, but there's a lot of potential here. Anthony Knapp, who had to play left tackle as a true freshman last year, then got hurt, was back at left tackle this spring. I thought maybe he was going to move inside, but Charles Jagusaw is the guy, the left tackle who got hurt at the beginning of last year, was out all year and then had to play in the national championship game. He looks like he's going to be the right guard. So with Anthony Knapp at left tackle and Emil Wagner at right tackle, and Wagner was great all last year, Billy Strouth at left guard, who again was in that mix last year, injuries, moving around, that kind of thing seems locked in. And then Ashton Craig, who won the center job last year, got hurt. He wasn't, I think, there all the way in the spring. Sullivan Absher started in the spring game at center, and he'll be in the mix there, but it's probably going to be Craig. So anyway, it should be Anthony Knapp, Billy Strouth, Ashton Craig, Charles Jagusaw, Emil Wagner as their starting offensive line. And then Gerby Lambert, who's a second-year guy, was the number 4 offensive tackle recruit in the country, will be a second year. And he had injury stuff last year too. He could be in that mix. It's not quite as experienced. It's high level. Yeah. I think I'll take Penn State's offensive line maybe a little bit on the experience, but this honestly might be a conversation between offensive line number 1 and offensive line number 2.
Yeah, and you have you should have confidence in like Joe Rudolph, Notre Dame's offensive line coach, getting that group to where it needs to be, provided they stay healthy. And the same for Phil Troutwine at Penn State, two very good offensive line coaches.
Yep. All right, defensive front 7. So those are our 3 offensive categories. Defensive front 7, we know Penn State's losing Abdul Carter, but they have a lot back.
Less back than I realized. Like I'm wondering about Penn State's defensive line specifically. So Abdul Carter's back, or excuse me, not back. Abdul Carter's gone. Denai Dennis Sutton is back at edge, and Zane Durant is back at tackle. And then like they're just counting on a lot of guys who haven't played a lot to like be ready to step up. It's like we discussed Penn State's sort of transfer portal posture and whether or not they're more aggressive. And I think you and I agree that they were this offseason. I would maybe argue they could have been more aggressive, especially at the defensive line position. They need to replace another defensive tackle. Devontae Thomas and Keziah Izzard are gone. Alonzo Ford is probably going to start at the other tackle spot. He's a big body. He played in 11 games last year. He's a good defensive tackle, but he's also never been a starting defensive tackle. So I don't know if he'll be able to handle like a large workload. And then everything else is just like, here's a second or third year guy who hasn't played a ton that we think is going to make the jump. Xavier Gilliam is a second year guy. Caleb Artis is a 4th year guy who hasn't played a whole lot. Ty Blanding is going into his 3rd year. He's played 66 snaps. Like these are the guys that Penn State is counting on. They didn't go out and aggressively add in the portal. The only portal interior defensive lineman they added was a 2nd-year player from Michigan named Owen Wafel, who didn't play last year. So like maybe he's like lingering and could be someone who steps up. Liam Andrews is in the 4-star top 50 guy in last year's recruiting class who redshirted last year. Like maybe he could step up. There's just clearly Penn State's confident in what they have in terms of young guys on the defensive line, but they better be right because if they're not, then it's like Zane Durant and Denai Dennis Sutton and not a whole lot else that I think gets you excited unless you're like a Penn State fan who's locked in on like the recruitment and development of these guys. At end, it's Dennis Sutton, and then like Zariah Fisher, I know is a guy whose name comes up like almost every year, but he's never been healthy. He's going into his 6th year. He's played 379 snaps. They added Enai White from Texas A&M, who was a major recruit, but hardly played in 3 years at Texas A&M. Max Granville, I think, is probably a guy that they're most excited about as a young guy who's going to jump up and I think play more on the edge this year. It was a number 306 overall in the 2024 class, but it's just a strong belief in the recruitment and development of the defensive line position is on display here, but it has to pay.
But is that not what they do every year? Like, and do they deserve to have that?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think historically, yes, a very good defensive line program. Yeah. I'm just saying, like in today's college football, you almost want to give them credit for it. But in today's college football, when you can address lack of experience, much easier than you used to be able to, Penn State chose not to do that. So like, I view it as a little bit of a gamble. It's been a long time since Penn State's had like a really bad defensive line. There were years where you could run the ball on them a little bit because they were kind of undersized, but in terms of like pass rush and stuff, like Penn State's always usually pretty good. So I think it will be again this year, but it lost a decent amount and is not flush with ready-made experience replacements.
I think you can believe in the guys they have there. It's just tough. Like I just think about a guy like Keziah Izzard, who was a nice defensive tackle for them last year and had a year of eligibility, I think, and could have stayed, and he went in the draft and went undrafted. It's like, oh man, just like throw him back in as another piece on that defensive line. I think Penn State could use that. I think Notre Dame's probably going to win this. Notre Dame, Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore were maybe their best edge guys last year. Traore got hurt in game 5, only played 133 snaps. Jordan Botelho got hurt in game 3, played 95 snaps. They're both back. And then in the meantime, Joshua Burnham, Junior Tahalamaka, Bryce Young all emerged and had to do stuff, and now they're back. And I think they have a chance to really have a rotation at edge and getting after the passer. And then they kind of did what you're saying Penn State didn't do. They added a couple bodies in the transfer portal that are probably going to help. They lose Riley Mills and Howard Cross at defensive tackle. But again, Howard Cross missed a bunch of games in the middle of the year last year, and then he came back, and then Riley Mills got hurt against Indiana and didn't play the final 3 playoff games. And Gabriel Rubio had to step in and start the 3 playoff games, and I thought played really well. So it's like, okay, so Gabriel Rubio and Donovan Heinisch. Heinisch had to play a bunch last year when Cross was out. They're both back, but they added Jared Dawson from Louisville and Elijah Hughes from USC as pieces at defensive tackle. And so they sort of added 2 transfers for the 2 guys that left. But then their depth is better because that depth had to play last year when those guys were hurt. I think they might be really good at edge and pretty solid at defensive tackle. And I think they might be great at linebacker. They have 4 guys at linebacker, and Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Kingston Villiamu Asa, and Jaden Osbury, who are all legit dudes, and probably only 2 of them are going to be on the field most of the time. They lose Jack Kaiser, who was their big experience guy last year, got drafted, played the most snaps at linebacker, but I don't think they'll miss him. I think the front 7 for Notre Dame has a chance, is certainly going to be good, and I think has a chance to be great, because I think the tackles will be solid, and I think they have multiple guys at edge and linebacker who have a chance to take a leap. So I'd take the Notre Dame front 7.
Yeah, I think I would too. Penn State enjoyed, I think, some good health along the front 7 last year, especially on the defensive line. So they only ended up playing like 7 defensive linemen like super regularly, but now only 2 of them are back. So like that's the trade-off with that. I didn't mention Penn State linebacker. Like Tony Rojas is back, and I think played a little banged up last year. He's got a pretty high ceiling. Like I could see him breaking out a little bit to being like a potential like first team All Big Ten kind of guy.
Okay.
Dom DeLuca is the other guy who's back, who's played a decent amount. I kind of view him as more of like a try hard, heart and soul kind of leader guy with maybe a limited ceiling. They needed somebody else, I think, to be really secure there, and they got him in Amari Campbell from UNC. He was an incredibly productive player last year, a late portal ad, 76 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. Like that's exactly what Penn State needed to do at that position, and they got it done. And like Keon Wiley is interesting there too. A younger guy, didn't play last year because of injury. I know they've always kind of liked him. So I think linebacker can be pretty solid for Penn State again. But enough questions for me along the defensive line that I would give the nod to Notre Dame here for the entire front 7.
All right, secondary. What's Penn State got?
They got AJ Harris back, all Big Ten caliber player. I think opportunity to be one of the better corners in college football this year. Have to replace Jalen Kimber on the other side. Elliott Washington III is probably the guy that's going to be. He was like a weight room monster in the winter, and James Franklin said like this is the most explosive guy on our team. So that's interesting. That's exciting, but they need him to be good because Kimber and Harris were both very good as transfer corners last year. Zion Tracy is back as a slot guy. He is smaller, like a different physical profile of the guys that Jim Knowles used in the slot at Ohio State and Oklahoma State. So I'm wondering if that's exactly what he's looking for. Maybe Zion Tracy might play a little more outside rather than in the slot in this new defense under Jim Knowles. Potential impact freshman Darius Dixon, 4-star guy, top 100 player. I think people are really excited about him coming out of spring. So I think corner could be good. They just have to shore up that spot opposite Harris. Zachy Wheatley's back at safety, was number 2 on defense and snaps last year. DeJuan Lane played in all 16 games as a true freshman, as a backup. I think he might be the guy that steps up and takes the spot of Jalen Reed, who went off to the NFL. And then another guy I would mention there is King Mack, who was at Penn State, transferred to Alabama, and now transferred back to Penn State. I think he could be a safety. I think he could be someone who like maybe competes with Lane to start next to Wheatley. Or I think he could maybe be the nickel in Knowles' defense because he's like a little bit of a bigger body type. So I think two very good established players back in Harris and Wheatley, and I think enough in both the safety and cornerback room to make up for what Penn State has lost.
Notre Dame, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, young corners last year. Leonard Moore, true freshman, took over when Ben Morrison, who was a high draft pick, got hurt. Leonard Moore was one of the great stories of the college football season a year ago, and now he has a whole year of experience, when last year he just showed up and they threw him in and he was more than ready. Going to be good at corner. And then they added Devontae Moore. They had Jordan Clark as their slot guy, who was a transfer last year from Arizona State, 1-year transfer. Now it's Devontae. It's Devontae Smith
from Notre Dame.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith, transfer from Alabama to Notre Dame, expected to fill in that same way in the slot. So Devontae Smith with the 2 guys who were established at corner, they'll be good at corner. And then they lose Xavier Watts at safety. Adon Schuler is back at the other safety spot. They added Jalen Stroman, a transfer from Virginia Tech, who missed all last year with an injury, but had been a multi-year starter there previously. Tay Johnson, young guy. I think they'll fill in okay. Watts is probably the biggest hole because they had 6 guys drafted, and Ben Morrison and Riley Mills didn't play in the college football in the national championship game because they were hurt. Jack Kaiser, they have a million linebackers. Mitchell Evans, he's a good tight end, but Raridan will be okay. And then Riley Leonard at quarterback. People are excited for TJ Carr. Xavier Watts is the biggest hole.
Yep.
But I think they have options there. So I think the secondary is going to be pretty good. Penn State always has great safeties. I really like AJ Harris, but I think the combination of Christian Gray and Leonard Moore as your 2 starting outside corners probably gives Notre Dame the secondary edge here. Yes?
Yeah, there's a little more certainty there, I think with Notre Dame. Even though Watts is the best player that's being replaced in either secondary, but I think I'd lead Notre Dame too.
All right, coaching. It's not just James Franklin versus Marcus Freeman. It's the Andy Koltelnicki, Jim Knowles coordinator combo making $1 gazillion. Both teams lost their defensive coordinators.
Mm-hmm. Both teams tried to hire Jim Knowles.
Penn State hired Jim Knowles and made him the first $3 million coordinator in college football history.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame hired Chris Ash, who was being a scout for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I think, Mike Denbrock was really big as the OC last year at Notre Dame. Getting him back to come back from LSU was a huge addition. Really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd take Koltelnicki, and I'm sure I'd take Jim Knowles. I think the Chris Ash thing replacing Golden has a chance to be fine, but you'd bet more on Knowles, and then it becomes a Marcus Freeman, James Franklin conversation. Overall coaching, where do you go here? Because I feel like coordinators, Penn State, maybe big games, Marcus Freeman beat James Franklin last year and seemed to have a motivational edge. Maybe you lean Freeman, but entire coaching staff, where do you go?
I think I lean Penn State a little bit. I like the coordinator combo of Penn State more than I like Notre Dame's. Although I think Andy Koltelnicki did a lot of good for Penn State's offense last year. You look at the Fermo index, they went from 18 to 5. Penn State's yards per play was the highest it's been since 2017. I still thought there was a little too much let's see how cute I can get with this stuff with Penn State and Koltelnicki sometimes. I don't think was always great. But I also think part of that was masking some deficiencies they had at the skill positions, and maybe he'll have to do less of that this year. I still think he's a good OC. I think Knowles is a great defensive coordinator. I think he's in an interesting spot because of the track record of Penn State's defense is incredibly strong over multiple coordinators, but he also has a decent amount to replace on defense too. I'm not all the way there on I definitely think Penn State's offense is going to be better than its defense. But even if we can even have that conversation, that is a vastly different place than what Penn State has been in for most of James Franklin's tenure. And I would maybe worry slightly about some of the personnel losses on Penn State's defense being too much to overcome, but we'll see on that. I guess I would still, for the coaching staff, I would lean Penn State because I think Knowles and Koltelnicki clears the Notre Dame coordinator combo a little bit.
I agree. And we did a whole show about how James Franklin is the most important person in college football, in Northern college football this season. I think you could argue in college football overall. We would direct you back to that show from a couple months ago in this feed to get our full James Franklin thoughts. But to go with the Penn State coaching edge here, I think makes sense, which takes us to schedule and intangibles. Notre Dame, we've talked about this a lot. They open at Miami on Sunday, August 31st. Then they're off, and they get Texas A&M at home, and then I don't know how they're losing. The schedule is just, they're going to have a chance, and the whole thing with Notre Dame has been they lose the game you don't expect them to lose. I don't know if that game, I'm not going to go through the entire Notre Dame season waiting for the next Northern Illinois or Marshall to jump up and get them. I don't know that it has 100% been vanquished. But they're going to get Miami in week 1. It's on the road. They're going to be starting a new quarterback, whether it's CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie, probably CJ Carr. We don't know where Carson Beck is going to be. in his elbow surgery recovery for Miami, and he's going to have a lot of pressure on him there. And Miami brought in a lot of guys in the portal. People are excited for Miami. I actually like Notre Dame's spot. I like Notre Dame's schedule. Penn State has some tougher tasks.
Yeah, Penn State has a nice lead into Oregon, so it's got 3 kind of cupcake non-conference games: Nevada, FIU, Villanova. Then it's off, and then it plays Oregon at home. And you and I have discussed that game or referenced that game a few times. I think we both like Penn State to win that game there. But that's like the first test, September 27th against Oregon at home. Then there's like another little mini ramp up, I guess, to play UCLA. Although it's at UCLA, you got to go all the way out west. They have Nico Iamaleava now. Maybe that's a little less of a certain thing win than maybe it was a month ago. Northwestern at Iowa. And Iowa has in the past derailed some Penn State seasons that have had expectations, and that game's at Kinnick. So that's one, October 18th. Then Penn State is off again before it has to go play at Ohio State on November 1st. So the 2 biggest games of the year, home against Oregon and at Ohio State, Penn State is off the week leading into that game. And then like it closes with Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. Like I think it gets through all those games. It's I guess you could call it like a 3-game season. Like certainly Oregon, Ohio State, but I think actually Iowa is fairly tricky, especially if Mark Gronowski is good. So there's some potential landmines there, I think, for Penn State. It's not a walk, certainly not a walk to like 11 wins or even 10 wins, but might be a walk to 9 wins, and then it's just a matter of what happens with those other 3 games.
The intangibles, I think Notre Dame's going to be really good. The expectations for Notre Dame are not as high as they are for Penn State. And so what does that mean? I think that maybe means I'd rather be Notre Dame because they still have a little bit of a chance to sneak up on somebody, and Penn State's not sneaking up on anybody. Penn State's going to have a target. I think Penn State has the chance to handle it, but they're in a spot that they've never been in, and they're loaded for bear. And so does that, it's a great opportunity, but it's a little something that they have to handle.
It's a burden to carry. I think that I don't think Notre Dame is carrying this year. People expect Notre Dame to get back to the playoff and compete for a championship, but it's not an or whatever or bust situation, I guess.
Yeah.
And it feels much more like that for Penn State. Do you know the last time, by the way, Penn State opened the season in the top 5 of the AP poll?
I do not.
1997.
Wow. Okay.
Do you know the last time Penn State opened the season as a top 10 team and finished with a better ranking than it opened with?
I do not.
1994.
Okay.
Usually did not handle seasons with expectations very well is what I'm getting at. And a trend that stretches beyond James Franklin's tenure.
Yeah. And that happens to a lot of teams. And Notre Dame, I didn't look this up, but I mean, Notre Dame is the most overrated team in the history of preseason polls. Notre Dame's in the top 10 and the top 25 constantly, and then goes 6-6. So it's not like Notre Dame is a stranger to being overrated. I think I would give Notre Dame a little edge here on less pressure, and they don't have to play Ohio State and Oregon. So
yeah, like, by the way, Penn State was number 1 opening the season in 1997, and they finished 9-3. Penn State is expected to exercise some demons on its way to winning a championship. That Notre Dame is just not in that position, so I would lean Notre Dame too.
But the other point in the modern world is you don't have to exercise the demons. The demons can eat you alive in the regular season, and you can still win the national championship. Ask Ohio State.
Sure.
So I think the structure here is also potentially very good for Penn State. That Ohio State game is going to have almost the same kind of vibe to Ohio State, Michigan. Ohio State, Michigan is singular in that rivalry, but in terms of having a team that you play all the time, that you measure yourself against, that you haven't been able to get over the top, Penn State and James Franklin versus Ohio State is actually a longer history than Ryan Day against Michigan, right? Like this is really a thing. And if that was the end all be all, I think I potentially would feel very different about Penn State's chances this year. But as Ohio State showed, Penn State can just go lose to Ohio State and then win the national championship. Mm-hmm. And so that just creates an environment that I think this is a very good team for the 12-team playoff. That if this was a 4-team playoff and it's like, all right, Penn State, you're number 1, show us what you got. And by the way, you better win at Ohio State or your season's dead. Holy moly. I'm not sure they could handle that. they might be a 14-1 national champ with a loss to Ohio State, just like Ohio State was a 2-loss national champ with a loss to Michigan. I think that's very on the table, but we'll give the intangible schedule edge to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame 4-3 edge in the categories. Notre Dame, the skill positions, the front seven and the secondary. And then the intangibles. So that's the 4 for Notre Dame. The 3 for Penn State, quarterback, offensive line, and coaching. They're both at 10.5 wins. Notre Dame's over is plus 152. Notre Dame's is plus 134. So that means slightly that Penn State is a little more expected to go over 10.5 wins. I'm not sure I actually would agree with that. I actually, just because on the schedule, I think I might think Notre Dame has a better chance to win 11. Anyway, who would you rather be in 2025?
Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is one of the, like, I guess we haven't defined this off the top of my head, like 8 to 9 teams I think could win a national championship this year. And Penn State is part of that group, but Notre Dame doesn't come with any of the white knuckle angst that Penn State season is going to come with.
So it's really an angst. It's an expectation and angst conversation. In so many other ways, it's pretty even, right? We're basically making an angst and opportunity decision here, right? We agree on that? I think if I had to pick a national championship game today, this might be it. I think that really might be where I am.
I need to see CJ Carr throw a pass in a game.
That's not committing to anything. And that's part of it too. So this is, if you'd rather be Notre Dame, you'd rather be the team with a quarterback who's never played versus a quarterback who's won a bunch of games and is going into his 3rd year as a starter. That's also this too. It's not only an angst and expectation and quarterback conversation, but you just picked, you said you'd rather be Notre Dame. And when I said this might be my national championship game, you said, oh, I don't know.
I just don't think Penn State season is going to be fun, man.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be fun for anybody.
Yeah. I don't know. Bootzilla's making a point that Ohio State lost to Michigan and then went on an unbelievable run. And Ohio State, had this veteran team and these coaches who had been through it a little bit. So if you want to make a comparison of, so Penn State loses to Ohio State, and then all they have to do is go on an unbelievable 4-game run of beating top 10 teams for a month,
right?
Which kind of has been the whole thing they can't do.
Yeah. And the thing they didn't have to do in the playoff last year to get to the semifinal.
Yeah. I really don't hold that against them, but they had the Notre Dame game in their hand and they gave it away.
Yeah.
So if they aren't a different team than the team that lost to Notre Dame, they're not going to get where they want to go. I think Notre Dame can probably be the same team it was last year, healthier, a little more experience with a bunch of the guys who had to play because of injury, now having that experience, and just making sure that they create a circumstance for the young quarterback to be able to succeed, and they're in good shape. Penn State's got to elevate. Penn State's got to be more. We just said Penn State may have held Drew Aller back for where he wants to get now by putting him in a phone booth a little bit. I actually think Notre Dame's path to a national championship is putting CJ Carr in a phone booth and just saying, listen, man, we got a really good defense. We got 4 receivers we believe in. We might have the best running back in the country. The offensive line's going to be good. Just don't throw picks, right? Where Penn State is telling Drew Aller, who's done that. If CJ Carr is Drew Aller, the current Drew Aller, I think Notre Dame might win the national championship. If Drew Aller is the current Drew Aller, I don't think Penn State's going to win the national championship. But I think Drew Aller has a pretty significant chance to elevate. And also, we are taking Drew Aller for granted by saying, oh, CJ Carr has to be as Drew Aller. It's like, oh, you mean the guy who's won 10 games a year as a starter every year and like played a bunch of big games and has a great arm and makes, right? Mm-hmm. So I will also say I'd rather be Notre Dame, but I am not worried about Penn State being Penn State. Seize the opportunity. I said the same thing about Ohio State last year. Don't let talent and experience be a burden. Let it be an opportunity. And I know they haven't been through it, but I believe in them. But I also believe in Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has less pressure.
Yeah, That's what it comes down to. I think both teams are very good. I think they're both going to be right in the thick of it, but the pressure element just steers me. Maybe I'm just a wuss. I can't handle the heat. I'm going with Notre Dame.
Yeah.
In that Penn State. Yeah.
I think Notre Dame's a little underrated right now. There's no chance that Penn State can't be underrated. People are thinking they might be the number one team in the preseason poll.
I've seen multiple post-spring rankings that have Penn State number one,
which we love. We love respect for the North,
Great.
but also
I think they should be. Yeah,
they've earned that.
Yeah,
they've earned that. So okay, so we will slightly say we'd rather be Notre Dame, even though it was very close in many, many significant ways.
Yeah.
Okay. When we come back, we'll rip Bill Belichick on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back. Thanks for being here. What is the deal with North Carolina? We don't have to spend a ton of time on this. The whole world's talking about it. I'm so glad he's not in the North. I did go back and read some things when he was hired of some people who were like, hey, this is a risk, but it really has a chance to work. It's a smart risk by North Carolina. I thought it was going to be a disaster, and it has been a disaster. What is going on?
Exactly what I thought was. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not exactly what I thought was going to happen because I didn't factor in the whole girlfriend thing being the thing that I just thought like the Bill Belichick was kind of washed and he would show us all that he was washed and UNC wasn't going to be very good. We'd have to wait until the games actually started for that to be a realization for everybody. But I guess we're getting a glimpse of it in the offseason. So, yeah, just a mess. And I think. I guess like the deal with this hire was that the AD was like kind of like strong armed into it by people who should be making decisions like who should be your football coach. And this is what you get for it. So it's embarrassing for UNC, but that was also predictable.
I don't want this to come across as ageist because I don't think there's a line where you shouldn't hire someone based on age. But I think it's much more about your mindset coming into a job. And also, he's just super old. I don't think he's the oldest coach in major college football. And the second is Kirk Ferentz. Kirk Ferentz is 69, and Kirk Ferentz has created this version of the Iowa football program. Hayden Fry made that version. Kirk Ferentz has made this version. It's so different when you're 69, leading a thing that you have built from the studs, and you know every in and out, versus I'm 72 and I just got here. I just think that's a very difficult situation. And I just think we have a lot of examples. There are actually some okay examples. I tried to go through, it's the catch a falling coach, right? You were good and now you're on the way out, which happens to all of us. And then there just is a level of program that seems overly eager at times to try to catch the formerly famous and formerly successful head coach that you never would get if he wasn't on the way down. And my lesson from this is stop. To those programs, it's stop trying. It's not worth it. Try to be smart and aggressive and go get somebody on the way up. Try to go get Kurt Cignetti, who's been a good coach for a long time, but never got the chance at a job like Indiana. You don't have to hire Kenny Dillingham, some 34-year-old at Arizona State that you're trying to get on the way up, but you can get a guy who is veteran, but has not reached his peak. Bill Belichick can't peak. He's so clearly past his peak because he had the highest peak in the history of the NFL. Whatever he does at North Carolina is not going to measure up. When you're hiring a guy who has no connection to your school, that no matter how much he succeeds, it can't be the best thing he's ever done, I want no part of that. I think you are selling your school short by settling for crumbs of a bigger program, whether it's the Patriots or whether. So South Carolina hired Lou Holtz in 1999 when he was 62, right? Formerly at Notre Dame. They were 0-11. No, they were 1-10 the year before they hired Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz's first year, they went 0-11. And then they went 8-4 the next year, and Lou Holtz was coach of the year. So I was like, okay, Lou Holtz, another example of don't do this. And I was like, oh, wow, that actually worked out great for South Carolina. But he was 62, not 72. But I think he is an example of this. So I think he's kind of contrary to my point. Then they went to Steve Spurrier. They hired him at age 60 after he had failed in the NFL. He lasted 11 years at South Carolina. So I think Holtz and Spurrier are in this Belichick range where I would say don't do this. And South Carolina got a bunch of pretty good years out of Lou Holtz and Steve Spurrier. Kansas failed miserably. Les Miles at age 65 in the 2019 season went 3-18 and then got fired for off the field stuff at LSU. Charlie Weiss, hired at age 56 in 2012 after Notre Dame, was fired in the middle of his third year when he was 2-2, went 6-22 overall. And then when you know what Kansas stopped doing, they stopped trying to hire the LSU and Notre Dame coaches on the way down, and they hired Lance Leipold on the way up, who is awesome, veteran, and never got a chance like this before. Guess what worked? Kansas got off this cycle. Learn a lesson. Don't do this. Herm Edwards, age 64, hired by Arizona State in 2018 after doing TV for 10 years, had been an NFL guy, went 26-20, also had a bunch of NCAA violations. He did recruit Jaden Daniels, so it wasn't an abject disaster. But then you know what they did? They got in the Kenny Dillingham business and they made the playoff because they took a risk on somebody on the way up. Arizona did this a bunch of years. John Makovic, age 57, after he was fired at Texas, they hired him in 2001, went 10-18. They fired him in his third year. Kevin Sumlin, age 54, hired by Arizona after he got fired at Texas A&M, was fired in his third year at 9-20. These guys are 20 years younger, 15 years younger than Belichick, but it's examples of this, trying to catch a guy on the way down. Arizona's got to get out of that business. Arizona State got out of the business. Kansas got out of business. Get out of this business. That's my bottom line lesson of all of this. We can make fun of Belichick. It's not about age because these guys are in their 50s and 60s. That's not too old. Kurt Cignetti's not too old. Lance Leipold's not too old. It's profile. And catch a falling coach. Think more of yourself. Have more respect for your own program than believing that, oh, well, I guess if we can get 8% of Bill Belichick, that's better than what we could get otherwise. No, it's not, North Carolina. You could have done better than this. And they did it to themselves by selling themselves short. And again, Mac Brown going back to North Carolina is different than this because there's something there already. He's done it before. He was 68 when North Carolina hired him back. He knew where the bathrooms were. He had a connection to the program. He wanted that program to succeed, not just himself. Rich Rod at age 62 back at West Virginia. It's different. Greg Schiano, age 54, going back to Rutgers. It's different. Bill Snyder retired at Kansas State, then came back at age 69 and coached for another 10 years. Of course, it's incredibly different. Even Bill Walsh, that I think is maybe the closest thing to Belichick, an NFL legend, then came back to college in 1992 at age 60, 12 years younger than Belichick, came back to Stanford, where he had been the head coach in the 70s for 2 years. He had a connection. It wasn't out of nowhere. And then Bill Walsh had one good year at Stanford, then it got away from him. Have more respect for yourself than to make a Bill Belichick hire. Please take this lesson. It's not cool. It's not funny. It's not the best your program can do. And North Carolina set themselves up for failure. And I'm so glad they're not in the part of the North.
I'm looking forward to laughing at them all year. I think you raise excellent points about not falling into a conversation that then becomes just a conversation about ageism. But I think it's also fair to say, like, maybe don't hire somebody who's never done anything before when they're 73 years old.
Right.
And also under 500 without the greatest quarterback of all time in their coaching career. But that's another conversation.
Yeah. So we thought it was weird and it's turning out weird. And I mean, I don't know. I don't wish ill on anybody. It's the people who hired him more than what's happening, right? It's that you made this decision.
Yeah, it's the process that allowed him to be the head coach there, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't begrudge Bill Belichick for taking UNC's $10 million. I would have done it too. It's UNC.
It's probably one and done, right? Yeah. One and done. I think we're one and done.
Yes. I don't even like. I wonder if we get through the season. Not to be hyperbolic. I wonder if they get through the season together.
Yeah, and it also is telling you, in the moment when he didn't get an NFL job, I was sort of like, wow, I'm kind of surprised he didn't get an NFL job. But I think the NFL teams are smart enough to say we're not going to catch a falling coach. It's the same thing. I don't think it's
they were. It's not like they were bad post Brady. Not like, oh, he had one off year without Tom Brady. They were bad.
Yeah.
29 and 38 in 4 years without him. Like falling, it might be too soft of a way to describe what happened in the Bill Belichick's tenure. Yeah.
It's really just a lot to ask. Okay, a couple things from the quarterback show, the perfect quarterbacks we did last week. Has your school had a perfect quarterback? We love interacting with our folks. Our guy John, one of our most loyal, interactive guys here in the YouTube chat, didn't like how we talked about Tom Brady. His point is not that Tom Brady, I think, should be Michigan's perfect quarterback, but we kind of got there. We had a conversation about Joe Montana at Notre Dame. And he said, when discussing Joe Montana at Notre Dame, you disparage Brady's career at Michigan. And in my humble opinion, I think you guys completely sell him short. You mentioned Montana's record as a starter at Notre Dame was 19-3. Brady's at Michigan was 20-5, which I think we did sell him short on that. And in 1999, when Lloyd Carr finally scrapped giving Drew Henson random series in Brady's final season, Michigan took off. That season, they finished number 5, beating Alabama in the Orange Bowl. In that game, Brady threw for 369 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I do think we got there more on Montana because Montana had a year where he wasn't the starter at the beginning of the year. And then when they put him in, they went 10-0 the rest of the year and won the national championship.
Yeah.
And Brady didn't win a national championship. And maybe if Lloyd Carr had gotten to him sooner, maybe they would have had a chance to do that. So again, I think the point is not if we think Joe Montana is in contention as Notre Dame's perfect quarterback, we should talk about Tom Brady the same way because Joe Montana won a national title and Tom Brady didn't. But we did give short shrift to Brady in that discussion. And I think John makes a good point.
He does. When we definitely did that, but I think a lot of people are guilty of just sort of like glossing over Brady's Michigan career, which is like, it's not like he was awful. He just wasn't not like a household name, but he was a good Michigan quarterback. So yes. I think the national title is enough of a separator between the two. But well said by John that Brady should not be just glossed over the way we did.
We did Tommy Frazier as Nebraska's perfect quarterback, a 2-time national champ. Interesting email from Matt. Totally agree that Tommy Frazier is the best quarterback Nebraska's ever had, but honorable mention needs to go to Brooks Behringer for the 7 games he started and won to keep their undefeated season alive. Thanks for entertaining shows during the offseason. So Tommy Frazier had some blood clots, and they had to put Brooks Behringer in, and he went 7-0 as a starter, and then people thought maybe he was going to be the starter the next year, and then he was tragically killed in a plane crash. So Brooks Behringer has this tragic but heroic legacy at Nebraska. And it's not that he should be their perfect quarterback, but by the way, as Tommy Frazier's going back to back, this guy's filling in and doing a great job. I thought it was an interesting email. Yeah. Matt on BYU, son of the North here, who now lives in Atlanta. I appreciate how you advocate for Northern football, cram at SEC and cram at ESPN, and especially enjoyed your recent perfect quarterback discussion. I did want to underscore your decision to name Steve Young as the perfect quarterback of Brigham Young. The school is named after his ancestor, regardless of Ty Detmer or Jake Retzloff. They'll never top that. So I think Steve Young is Brigham Young's great grandson, I think is the correct lineage of that. So yeah, but how many awesome quarterbacks are running around as related to the guy who started the school?
Yeah, it's not called Detmer University.
No, BDU, Brigham Detmer University. This is one of those things. Young is like Brigham Young. You just hear BYU, but even that name, Brigham Young, it's just a guy's name, but it sounds like it makes sense now. It's like I have a goose thing loaded for watch at some point. But like Canada geese, you have people complain about Canada geese, and they're not from Canada. They're just the guy who named them is like Matt Canada, the one-time Maryland head coach, named those geese, and so they're called Canada geese. So it just becomes a thing. Yeah, they're not. It's not because they're not Canadian geese, and they're not named because they fly down from Canada. They could be called Landis geese if you had named the goose. So. Yeah.
What the heck?
Sometimes things get named. Now I ruined my whatcha, but I just wanted to drop that right here. Blowing minds. Baby carrot.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. We'll double check it. This is not an official whatcha, so I could be making things up, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Joe Canada. Name the geese. They're like, do you want to call them Joe Geese? It's like, nah, let's go with the last name, Canada Geese. Okay. You think they fly down from Canada, don't you?
Just a quick Google says that they are from Canada. Yeah.
No, Joe Canada. Okay.
Well, they're in both the U.S. They're in North America, but they can be found in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean they can't be found in Canada, but I don't think they're named for Canada. That's the point. Yeah. All right. We'll do more research on Joe Canada later. Pat White. Some people brought up Major Harris, which is a good thing to bring up. Yeah. Major Harris has his number retired by West Virginia, and Pat White doesn't, because I think part of their qualifications for retiring numbers, you've got to be a consensus All-American, and Pat White wasn't, and Major Harris was. And Major Harris, about 2 decades before Pat White, did lead West Virginia to a 1-3 Fiesta Bowl, where they were 11-0 in the regular season in 1988, and were number 3 and lost to number 1 Notre Dame. But like, that's an awesome West Virginia season. And so, and then he went 8-2-1 the next year and then turned pro. So he's a college football Hall of Famer because he was an All-American, and he's has his number retired by West Virginia. We also had some West Virginia people respond and say Pat White is the guy. Pat White's the GOAT. But our guy Seth Shaner wanted to throw Major Harris in the conversation, and I think it's good to throw him in.
Yeah, it's good to call out. I just think you say to me West Virginia football, the first person I think of is Pat White. So that was.
Some of it's generational. I think if Pat White didn't exist, I think we might have had a really long Major Harris conversation about West Virginia. But anyway, you think about, and the thing of both Pat White and Major Harris is they were both individually excellent quarterbacks and rare talents, and it translated. They both had their teams on the precipice of a national championship and didn't quite get there. Pat White lost 13-9 to Pitt. Major Harris lost to Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, but they're right there. And for West Virginia football, and we said winning was the number one thing when we're looking for a perfect quarterback, both Major Harris and Pat White weren't just great. They elevated the entire program, the entire university, the entire state. So we went 1 and 1A. We kind of did a slash on a couple of them. I'm not sure that I'm saying that Major Harris should be a slash with Pat White as the perfect quarterback, but I maybe would hear the argument if a West Virginia fan wanted to make that argument. All right. Last couple things other than the quarterback stuff. And again, we invite you to send us questions, comments, askkotn@gmail.com. From Ben, longtime listener. You're honestly the best college football podcast I've ever listened to. You both bring content and ideas that keep me intrigued and excited for every Monday and Wednesday. That said, not having Quinshon Judkins on the 2 deep for the all transfer team is an all-time miss. 1,000-yard rusher, 6 touchdowns in the playoff. I didn't even recognize the 2 dudes you mentioned as running backs. And Quinshon Judkins was a 2nd-round pick. So Jonah Coleman and Des Reed from Washington and Pitt, who were those choices, are both awesome. I think this primarily goes back to 2 things, which is there were some really good transfer running backs in the North last year. And then also Quinshon Judkins, while sharing the load with Trevion Henderson, was very good all year, right? Was very good. And then he was like a beast when they needed him in the playoff, where Des Reed and Jonah Coleman, maybe over the course of their seasons and what they did for their teams, had more of a heavy burden because they weren't sharing it with someone like Trevion Henderson. So
sure.
You thought about Quinshon Judkins. You certainly thought about it.
Yeah, he was. I think Quinshon was maybe the hardest guy to leave off the list. Part of it was I wanted to be consistent with what our all North team was, and Des Reed was on that. So then it kind of just looked like one running back spot. And Quinshon Judkins certainly had a strong case for it. I would just say this from a production standpoint. Coleman, 1,060 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. Judkins, where's Judkins? I lost him. What I'm saying is their production was basically the same. In terms of total yards, average yards, and touchdowns, and Judkins played more games than those guys. So production standpoint, the argument doesn't really favor Judkins all that much, but he was excellent in the playoff, and he was a great pickup for Ohio State. I'm not trying to shortchange him at all.
This is one of those things in conversations like this, you have to go to production. You have to use stats at least a little bit. And kind of the whole thing with Ohio State is they wanted to keep Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson fresh for the playoff run. So they didn't overburden either of them during the season, which kind of probably squished down their production by 20%. Whereas Pitt and Washington were saying at times, Des Reed and Jonah Coleman, can you please save us and be our entire offense? And so what would you rather do as a team? Well, Ohio State won the national championship, and Washington and Pitt each went 6-6 in the regular season. But then when you get into a conversation like this and you're trying to splice it, maybe you go toward the guys who just were leaned on more by their schools, which I think is what you're describing here.
Yeah, and also just quickly on the draft thing, Coleman and Reed are back this year, so they weren't able to be drafted.
Yeah. Last one. This is from Matt. Not sure why you love Fran Brown so much and think Barry Odom is clueless when Syracuse had to take Barry Odom's Mountain West team to overtime, all while UNLV had a very high transfer rate in both of Odom's years there. So this is referencing first-year coach Barry Odom, second-year coach Fran Brown at Syracuse. Last year, Syracuse and UNLV played an absolute banger of an overtime game that Syracuse went and won on the road, Fran Brown versus Barry Odom. We had a conversation on the Wednesday show about transfer portals and just saying we kind of liked some of the moves Fran Brown and Syracuse were making and just rebuilding almost from scratch. Barry Odom and Purdue were kind of just grabbing a bunch of guys. Continuing from that, maybe you have to look at player evaluation on a case-by-case basis versus plug in taking these guys because it fits a narrative. It will also be interesting to see how the outgoing Purdue transfers do, because especially on defense, where effort is a key factor of success, there were a lot of instances of not giving much. So if this is a little bit standing up for Purdue, which we want people to do here,
sure.
And I'm not saying that Matt's necessarily a Purdue fan, maybe he just thinks this, but like we want you to stand up for your team. Syracuse can be a little more targeted in the portal. And we were just saying, like, first year Fran Brown didn't just completely like bring in 80 transfers like both West Virginia and Purdue are doing now. We understand why Purdue is doing it. We also find it interesting that Purdue had some guys go to high-level teams going out in the portal, but clearly it didn't work. So whether that's on Ryan Walters for not getting the most out of those guys, whether it's on those guys to some degree that there was more talent there than a 111 and Purdue team. I like Matt's email. We're not out on Purdue, but we, I think, are just bracing people and acknowledging the fact that West Virginia and Purdue are basically starting from scratch. And not every first-year coach chooses to do that / has to do that. But I think both West Virginia and Purdue are in this spot, and they have to take a million swings in the portal.
Yeah, I'm not out on Barry Odom. I think Barry Odom was a good coach, and I think when we did a show many moons ago about like who we think the top guys could be for the job, one of us, if not both of us, mentioned Barry Odom. I think for Purdue. So I think he did a great job at UNLV, and it's a good job to call out that UNLV gave Syracuse all it could handle. It's a hard job. It's a heck of a feat to have to rebuild that roster with the resources that are available to him. So, but no, not out on Barry Odom at all. And it's just like starting points matter, and Syracuse's was better than what Barry Odom's doing at Purdue. Yeah.
Okay. This show, I think, is a reflection of what a bunch of our future shows this offseason are going to be. We're not going to necessarily have a showdown, a KOTN showdown with two teams in context with each other every single show, but we have 13 more showdowns to get through, and the season will be here before you know it. So your team's going to be represented here, and we just want to get through it, provide context, have it be a way to evaluate our teams, but a little different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to keep talking about the North in interesting ways, but I would look for showdowns a decent amount, and then we want to work in your questions and comments as much as possible. So I don't know that we might do a mailbag show at some point, but we want to keep, I think it's fresh, Bill, to say something, do something, and then have people who disagree with us, agree, disagree, bring up something we didn't think of, comment in a way that we bring it up on a show that's not too far removed from the original discussion. So we want this feedback loop, because this show is your show, people. It exists because you're here, and we want your comments, and we certainly want to acknowledge that at times we're going to miss something. You're going to disagree with us. For a team that you love, you might know that team better than we know it, and we want people to send us those questions and comments at askkotn@gmail.com.
Yeah, please do. I like the feedback. I like the constructive criticisms, and also like to be pointed in the right direction if I'm ever off base on something. So thank you for those of you who have done that so far.
So we appreciate it. We will see you on Wednesday. We do have another showdown planned for Wednesday. We have a Southern Visitor planned for Wednesday, and we will see all of you guys then. For now, thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.